Well, hello, everybody. Yeah, like Patty said, I've just been really lucky to work in a huge variety of settings. The military invests a lot of time into leadership development. And it is a skill set. And it's much like people think designers or painters are just born as natural painters. I think leadership is like that too. A lot of people think that you're just kind of born as a natural leader. I think there are people, many people who are natural leaders, but there's an underlying technique, set of tools and set of skills that really make great leaders. And so, Anka referred to this, there are just so many resources out there to help train you or to help, frame how you think about your leadership style. One that I particularly like, it's a workbook. It's called the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And maybe it's come up in the past, but if you actually want to, just on your own time, start working through worksheets and start developing, any aspects, any one of the 21 aspects, it is something that takes practice. Delegation is often thought of as a management skill, and it is a management skill. But there is a leadership reason to delegate. The most important, and when I talk to people about delegation in different ways you can delegate, I think that there is a natural inclination to hold back as a manager. And people have different motivations for holding back. One is that they don't want to usurp control. You're a micromanager. You want to make sure that it's being done the right way. It takes time. It takes time to talk to somebody else and coach them about what you want to have accomplished. In some cases, people feel uncomfortable if you know that somebody's particularly talented, that somebody else might have ownership of that product, and very selfishly feel like you're not going to get recognized for whatever it is that they are doing. Whatever the barrier is, there's a compelling reason to force yourself beyond that and to go ahead and cede control. I'll tell you what it is. One thing that I think I passed out some sheets, and those are the skill sets. What I've passed out are the skills and the techniques to effectively delegating, and we'll go through that. But I want to motivate you to delegate, which is a hard thing to do, right? Delegate, I'm telling you to do it, that's authoritarian. But you can't lead a horse to water, you got to want to do it, and I'll tell you why you want to do it. So here's you, and here's all the authority that's been bestowed upon you and your team. By the organization or company that you're with. And then here's your team, whoever they are. So right now, you're responsible for all the functionings of this. And you can choose to delegate authority or keep it all within you. You can choose to delegate tasks or you can do it all yourself. The more you're able to delegate both authority and tasks down to your team, this is your time. This box is your time. The more you're able to delegate that down, the more this frees you up to do the thought leadership stuff, to innovate, to strategize, to really focus on what it is that you as a person are trying to accomplish, to self-actualize, in your profession, or alternatively, and for your organization, achieving higher goals. And as you practice delegation, this box grows because you will continue, the authority always rests within you. You're never getting rid of that authority. Regardless of what your team is doing, everybody in the organization will continue to look to you. But as you practice delegation and as people within your organization grow, you can cede more and more authority and task down to your team. And hopefully you're transferring all of that so that your time is wholly focused on aspirational goals, on innovation, on creativity, and not on conducting tasks. So that's the reason to do it. And quite frankly, I think most of you in this room would much rather be in that space. I know I would. I would love to just spend my time thinking and motivating and leading and not doing stuff. But doing stuff, the tasks, it's hard work. It's hard work being introspective. And being visionary, it is very difficult work. But, a lot of people use tasks and, whatever, and kind of the control piece. is actually a way of either procrastinating. It's because it's hard to work on some of those more complex issues. You know, or it's just sort of getting over some sort of hurdle. But I'll tell you, you have way more fun up here, I think. The other thing, too, is that I think as you move up in the leadership chain, you really do have to make more and more sacrifices. You know, you're taking on more responsibility, and as you advance, if you want to keep advancing, you have to learn how to depend on your team so that you can take on more responsibility. So anyway, that's the reasons to do it. But like I said, I think what's really exciting is that delegation is a technique, and it just takes practice. And if you can kind of get off the horse and start taking, you know, working through some worksheets and some steps, you can get to it pretty quickly. Understanding the 10 levels of delegated authority. So this was kind of, I thought, very helpful. So just like leadership, there's different styles and there's different tasks and there's different levels of authority that make sense for whatever the goal, your project goal is, or who your team members are, more importantly. So on the low end, and this, I think, I'm not going to go through these 10 levels because you guys can go through that. But at the very low end, on task 1 is wait to be told. You are not ceding any authority whatsoever. You are just assigning a task, and once they're done with it, they have to come back to you. You need to verify what they're doing before they can move on to the next one. And then it's kind of a sliding scale, and I would say that probably for you guys, and for me, most of my team doesn't fall in number 1. They fall somewhere between number 4 to 8. And it also probably depends on the project, you know. And number 10, being where you have ceded complete authority, you're allowing that person, an individual, to make all the decisions, to run the team, to bring the resources, and to go ahead and move forward. Now, so I think it's really important to sort of know what the trade-offs are between, you know, task, you know, kind of the lowest level of delegated authority to the very highest. The first is that there is absolutely no decision-making ability that you are prescribing to your worker when you're dealing at the task 1 level. When you're going to task 2, you are basically delegating your authority away. And I don't mean away, but I mean, like, you know, you're giving it to somebody else. This obviously means that you have a lower level of trust or trust in their skill, whereas here, you're really operating with somebody where you have very high levels of trust. You feel comfortable going ahead and delegating that. I would say that on this one, you're achieving some time savings. And you know, one of the things that kind of bugs me a little bit, although I think it's important, is that delegation is always talked about in terms of time savings. It is, you are saving time, but really what you're accomplishing is recapturing that time so that you can be in innovative space. And be thinking strategically. Hello, David Bauer. And then when you're getting to the highest level, you're achieving max time savings. And then the other thing that's important here is that you're dealing with a high level of feedback. As soon as a task is done, they're coming to you and you're giving them feedback. Check, we're moving on, you know, or please go back. And one thing about delegation in all cases is that it is an iterative feedback loop. You will always be giving some sort of feedback at some point, but this is much lower. And so a couple different things. You know, what you want to do is, you know, whatever your task is, task A, this is sort of the technique, and this is really how I would prepare if I were you. If you have a program or a task and you kind of want to start somewhere, you really kind of go through this, define what your task is, and then start taking a look at your team, you know? And if you're not comfortable delegating, start small. It's kind of like, you know, if you're going into sales for the first time or fundraising and you hate making that first, you know, cold call, write the script down, get behind a phone and pick up that first phone call with the person that you feel most comfortable with. So practice. And then, you know, by the 5th phone call, it's like rolling off the tongue. Delegation is very, very similar. So pick your task, pick your team member, and then you kind of end up picking for your team member and for your task somewhere along the spectrum of what you feel comfortable with. Okay, I feel comfortable with this dude or dudette, you know, to be giving them level 4 level of, you know, authority and whatever and control or task. Then you have to sit down with them and explain what the big picture is, blah, blah, blah. You have to get buy-in from that person. Give that person an opportunity to say, I accept the task. I'm committing to the task. Or I have questions, you know, or I'd like to, I would like to, you know, develop a little bit of consensus around this because I feel comfortable with this and I don't feel comfortable with that. Go through that exercise and then talk to them about, you know, everybody knows this, like deadlines, blah, 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 and the feedback. Come back, make sure, you know, and I think that that formula and this formula that's provided on page 3 really kind of reminds you what the steps are. And then once you practice it a couple times, you know, by the 3rd time that you're cold calling, you got the script down. The goal, I think, of identifying where on the spectrum you are is one, going back to here, is that you want any individual on your team. One individual might start at 2, one individual might start at 9, but you want every single one of them to be advancing up that scale. And with that development of their ability to take on more and more authority and tasks, that's how you grow this transference of workload from you onto your team. As an example, I'll just read a little bit of authority level 10. So decide where action needs to be taken and so this is what you're telling you know, your team member. You know, this is the highest level of authority that you're bestowing on any of your team member and the lowest level of control that you are exerting on that particular program. You know, decide where action needs to be taken, manage the situation accordingly. This is your area of responsibility now. So you're fully seating that. And this is the most freedom you can give another person without changing, you know, formally their job. You're giving them strategic responsibility. You know, they are responsible for defining what changes in the project, tasks, analysis, decisions are necessary for management, et cetera. If you have like a room full of people like we do today, you know, and you spend time together over the course of the next 6 months, there will be natural leaders that emerge and people will follow them. They'll follow them because they want to be influenced by that person, or that person has influence or knowledge that others in the room gravitate toward. That is natural leadership. And so I think in the absence of delegated authority, you know, you really kind of got to up your game in developing your natural leadership skills because people will want to follow that regardless of whether or not, you know, you've been assigned. I actually think that a lot of that gets in the way too. I mean, you know, if, you know, this, you know, you've got to fall underneath, you know, my, you know, umbrella, my organizational structure. I think that you can create work. I mean, you guys are going through this. You can create within your organization groups where people are voluntarily coming. It's almost like a board, right? Like you're voluntarily electing to use your additional time to work on something that you're trying to accomplish. So you have natural volunteers who are anxious to be delegated to and who are anxious to have ownership of the product.